Okay, well, we'll just go ahead and get started anyway. So glad everybody could make it. And we are in person and in Central Coast. We have Emily here. The audience camera disappeared too, so you can't see who's in the room.
Okay, fine. I'll turn my camera back on.
Oh, there we go. Okay.
That was why I turned it off, because there was a lot of me going on.
And we have Mark in the room with us, and we'll get going. So, first of all, the topic that we want to cover today is how to set yourself up to have a successful closing. So I want to ask, what is the one thing that you think is the best thing that you can do to set each and every transaction up to have a successful closing? Oh, am I up there now?
Yeah. Good communication.
Okay, good communication is definitely important. Yeah. But there's a certain piece of communication that is very important. What might that be?
Setting expectations.
There you go. Setting expectations. So setting expectations is super, super important. Okay. What are the different types of things that we need to set expectations around?
Deadlines.
Okay, that's definitely one. What else? Thanks, Marissa. And please turn your cameras on. We do not have enough cameras on. You know how we show up here is how we show up everywhere. So if we're going to be on Zoom, we need those cameras on. Should we turn the TV off behind you? No, because then I can see. Can you put that up over there? No? Okay.
I know, I hate it. But the one right behind you, I mean.
Yeah, that's fine. Okay. So what do we need to set expectations on besides deadline?
Things like contingencies and like what they look like getting inspectors and having them come out to the house. The appraisal happens if it comes out short. Things like that.
Absolutely. Inspections, reports, all of that good stuff. What else? Thank you, Marissa.
You're welcome.
I'm sorry. That's okay. So where do the expectations begin? Where's the first time you're setting expectations with a potential client?
Role might be.
I'm sorry?
What our role might be in the process.
Okay, and where do we have that conversation? In the beginning. When we very first start talking to our clients, we set expectations, right? We start every potential client whether it's a buyer or seller with the qualifying questions. In which case, the goal of that is to end by setting what? Thank you to those who turned your cameras on, by the way. This is going to be really boring if you guys just want to hear me talk the whole time. When we have a qualifying conversation with a client, what is our end goal of that conversation?
Set an appointment.
To set an appointment. And so the very first expectation we set for the appointment is to make sure all parties that need to be involved are present, right? Then when we get to either the buyer consultation or the listing appointment, we set expectations about the market, how we work within the current market. We set expectations around how we work together with that client, right? When we go into transaction, into contract, we set expectations about when everything needs to be done, depending on what side of the transaction that we're on. And we set expectations even in keeping clients for life. So setting expectations is the single most important thing you can do to have a successful transaction. Okay, so let's talk a little bit deeper about that. So the very first thing we know we should all do, and this is part of having a successful transaction, is asking the qualifying questions. Right? So when we have a buyer or seller raise their hand and say, I'm thinking about or I want to buy or sell a house, the very first thing we do is start having the qualifying conversation by asking the questions. And for those in the PC program, you'll find those in the PC toolkit. So those questions set the stage to find out what?
If they're
What they're
serious
looking
about,
for.
Both of those things, right? If they're serious in buying or their motivation, right? Are they an A, a B, or a C buyer? Do we go ahead and set the appointment now? Do we nurture them to an appointment later on? And then, yeah, what they're looking for, we definitely want to know that, and we can find out more about that at a buyer consultation, right? So once we find out that they're an A buyer, does anybody know the definition of an A buyer, by the way?
Someone
somebody-
who's
Go ahead.
someone who's gonna transact in the next 30 days.
Yeah, I would say even in the next 2 weeks, right? It's somebody who is ready, willing, and able. They have to be all three of those things. And such that if you were to go out today and find just the right property, they would write an offer. Or if you were to go do a listing appointment with them today, they would list their home today. Okay, that's an A buyer. Maybe a couple things need to happen. Maybe they need to get pre-qualified. Maybe they need to move money for an earnest money deposit. Maybe on the seller side, they want to do a few minor repairs on the house. So maybe it'll be a week or two, right? But in other words, they're ready, willing, and able to transact. Now, if they're only two of the three things, they're probably a B client, right? Where something has to come together to make them all three of those things. And then, of course, if they're one of those things, ready, willing, or able, it doesn't mean we don't want to work with them. It just means that we're going to nurture them to the point of appointment and transaction. So the very first step, the qualifying question, so much of the time, that is the step most agents leave out. So what most agents do is they get a sign call from a buyer, or they have somebody that says they want to sell a house and they go, boom, they make the appointment to go do it. But we don't know anything about them. So then they get to the point where I met with them, I talked to them, they say they want to do this, but they just won't sign the agreement. Well, that's because we don't know anything about them. We didn't find the motivation. We didn't figure out what it is that they need to do. So that is the single most important step. That starts off setting the expectations for a successful transaction. Now we go to the appointment, whether it's a buyer consultation or a listing appointment. This is where we set expectations again. This is going to come up throughout the entire process, right? So the expectations of the market. What can your buyer or seller expect given the current market that we are in? What's the average days on market for that home in that price range if it's the seller? Because the average days on market for a home that is in the median price in your market is different from a home that is a luxury home or a home that is a fixer-upper. And so we have to set proper expectations based on that particular client's needs. Okay, what about the buying market? Again, expectations need to be set as to when they should expect to write an offer. How fast do they have to move to write an offer? Is the area and price range they're looking in prone to multiple offers, so they have to jump when they know the house is right? Right? Or, and if we don't set those expectations and we're telling them, oh, you've got to write an offer today if you want any chance of getting this house. if we haven't set the expectations of the market, what are they gonna think about us?
You don't know.
Okay, maybe that we don't know something, what else might they think we're trying to do?
Just being salesy.
Yeah, pushing them to do something they don't know if they wanna do yet, right? But if we've set the expectations, now we take that completely out of the equation because we've explained what needs to happen. Okay, so as far as qualifying a client and having the appointment for the client, do you have any questions around either of those two things? No? Okay. So once we've set the expectations for the market, we also want to set expectations for, if you have how many people have worked with buyers? How many people have had to show buyers more than 10 homes before they wrote an offer? Okay, how fun is that? So, and I can tell you a story about what happened to me years ago, like over 20 years ago. I had a buyer who I lost count at 88 homes. Showed them 88 homes. We ended up somewhere in the middle of that. I probably had showed them 20 something homes, and they decided to write an offer on, guess which house? The very first house that we saw. Well, it turns out that by the time they got to that point, that property was already in escrow, and so we had to move on. So thus came the 88 plus homes. And then we found out that the home that they really wanted fell out of escrow, and they ended up writing an offer on that home. How can we avoid that? Now, mind you, anybody showing somebody 88 homes, they're crazy, okay? The only reason that I fell into that was because I was helping out another agent. It was a shared client, not fully my client. Now, here's the thing. Even today, shared client or not, I would never, ever do that. You shouldn't have to show a client more than 5 to 7 homes before they really find the right home. And I mean, keep in mind, maybe you've shown them 2 or 3 homes, wrote an offer, didn't get accepted because there's multiple offers. Now we got to go look at 2 or 3 more. That's a little bit different scenario. They're still pulling the trigger, right? They're still seeing a few amount of homes and pulling the trigger. They're writing an offer. But we're talking about the client who won't make up their mind. Okay, so when we set the expectation about seeing homes, we need to set the expectation that, you know what, oftentimes the very first home you walk into is gonna be the home. And if you feel that when you walk into the home, please don't think you have to look at 10 more homes to know this is the right home. You know it when you see it. Now, if you don't get that fuzzy feeling when you walk into the home, that's okay. We'll go look at more homes. But in this market, if you walk into that first home and it's the one, we've got to jump. Right? So first of all, we need to let them know it's okay that the first one can be the home. And there's been many, many scenarios where that's been the case. Now, if the first one didn't give them that warm, fuzzy feeling, and this is where I want to move, that's okay, we go to number 2. When we go to house number 2, well, let's back up a little bit. First of all, when we're sending them a list of homes to look at, how many homes on average are you sending to your clients? And I'm not asking this for a right or wrong answer, I'm curious what you're doing.
5.
That's
5.
5, okay. So are you only sending them 5 to look at? Or are you telling them you're only gonna look at 5? No one wants to admit, okay. Okay,
I'll speak up, Jody. I mean, I would say that for myself, I have them on the MLS, so they're getting daily updates of what they're looking for. And then if they have the time available that weekend, we're looking at properties, but I probably would not recommend, I mean, you're trying to narrow it down, not expand the search. So I would say 3 at the most on a weekend. Yeah, and it just depends on the market, like you said. Are you doing multiple offers? Is it just, yeah. So anyway, that's my 2 cents.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah, and typically once after we send that initial list of homes, the MLS is doing the heavy lifting for us, right? Because they are sending them things. And we're really only needing to do that if we didn't find homes the first time out, right? But in that initial list, I would send them 7 to 10 homes, maybe, with the expectation that they're gonna pick no more than 3 to 5 to look at. Right? Because you're at this point too, you're getting a feel for exactly what they meant by the things that they said. So, and that also helps you narrow down what it is they really mean by looking at homes. So then you let them know, okay, we're gonna go look at your top 3 or 5. And it's okay if the very first home you walk into is the home. Don't think we have to keep looking. I'm happy to cancel those appointments and save you your time, right? But let's just say the first home isn't your favorite home. What we're gonna do is at the end of each showing, I'm gonna ask you a couple of questions about the home. And then based on those questions, we'll go to the next home and we'll do the same thing until we've narrowed it down for you. So if we show house number 1, we ask things like, okay, what was your favorite part of this house? What was your least favorite thing about this house? Was there a deal breaker in this house? And sometimes there's not a deal breaker. They have a favorite thing, a least favorite thing, but it's not really just they want to see some more, right? So now we go to house number 2, and at the end of that, we ask the same questions, but we add one more very important question. If you could only choose between house 1 and house 2, which house would it be? Whichever house they choose you, we never talk about the other one again. That is out of the picture. And you do that until they've chosen the house that they want. And on average, you shouldn't have to see more than 3 to 5 homes, maybe 6, depending, for a buyer to make up their mind. Any thoughts, questions, comments? Okay.
I like showing buyers more properties than that, just in general. So they get a feel for the market, and so they're more confident when you do write the offer and submit, that they saw like the ones that weren't gonna work, and they feel more confident about the offer that they submitted. So.
Okay, I can understand that, but that's also part of the reason to send them more homes than you're actually gonna show them from the MLS. And if they truly want to see them, but really it's a matter of time, right? As we get really busy in our businesses, we don't have time to show buyers homes just to show them homes, or excuse me. I don't think they need to see more than 3 to 5 homes to really get a feel for that. The other thing, another expectation, and I'm not saying that's wrong, by the way, and it could depend on the client, right? Because it depends. Are you working with a C client? That's probably the right approach. The C is that person that needs to know every detail of everything, right? Are you working with a D client? That's not the right approach. Because the D just wants to go see the house they want to see, and they want to see if all the boxes are checked, and they're writing an offer and they're on to their next thing. So we have to take that into consideration for sure. I just lost my thought. It'll come back to me. Okay, so once we do write the offer, once we are ready to open escrow, we have to set expectations there too. But remember, the expectations on the buyer side, and we'll stick with buyer for now just to walk through this, the expectation on the buyer side about what to expect through the entire process should be done at the buyer consultation. So they should understand what it's gonna take and what's involved in looking at homes, in writing an offer. Once they write an offer, what's gonna happen? How long does the seller have to respond? What if the seller doesn't respond in the 3 days that's written on the offer? Right? Is their offer void? No, it's voidable. They don't have to move forward, and they can. But they need to know that because sometimes sellers take their dear sweet time getting back to us because they're getting multiple offers, or maybe they were on vacation or out of town, or just maybe one of the parties is out of town. So we need to set those expectations with our buyers. And then the process. Once they do get an accepted offer, okay, when does the earnest money deposit have to be in? We're gonna order home inspection and whatever other inspections they want. But now, let's stick with the buyer for now, and then we'll back up to the seller. We're in escrow. They want a home inspection, and let's just stick with that for ease right now. They can have any inspection that they wanna have, okay? Super important that we set expectations around home inspections and any inspections, right? We are doing the inspection for the intent for you to learn about your home and learn about how to take care of your home and to see if there's anything glaring that sticks out that could be a safety concern. Okay, we are not doing an inspection to find every little thing wrong and nickel and dime the seller in a request for repairs. And so we want to make sure that we're setting the expectations with the buyer properly so that they understand when they get that inspection back, it's going to be 35 to 50 pages, depending on your inspector. It's not meant to be 35 to 50 pages of things to ask for. It's to teach them about their house, to know where things are located, where the emergency shutoffs are located. And a really good home inspector is going to spend the last 20 to 30 minutes of the inspection walking with your buyer through the home and teaching them about the home. And so when they look at the inspection report, that's what they're going to see. Oh yeah, he told me about that, right? And if you have a good home inspector, and this is me setting an expectation for you, a good home inspector will do that, and they will never, ever tell your client what they should ask the seller for. If you're working with an inspector that does that, you need to never work with them again. The inspector is not a party to the transaction. They have no idea if your client got the deal of the century and shouldn't ask for a penny. And they have no idea if your client is paying through the nose and has maybe a good right to ask for some things. That is not their place, okay? And make sure, because many a deal has died because an inspector can't keep their mouth shut. And they have scared buyers. Or what'll happen is the buyers will ask for everything under the sun and then the deal dies because the seller thinks they're nuts. So we have to make sure that we're setting those proper expectations. And if you've never worked with a particular inspector before, ask them those questions before you set the appointment. And if you need recommendations for good inspectors, you can ask us, you can ask people at your local market center. They'll help you know who to ask, because there are definitely some phenomenal ones out there and there are not some not so great ones. Great people, just not great inspectors. Okay, so once we do submit the request for repair, then of course we have to set the expectation. The seller may agree to any of it, or all of it, some of it, none of it. They may agree to give you a credit. So just want you to know how things might go. The other thing for either side, and this is an important expectation to set, is how long does closing take once everything's done? Okay, buyers sign their loan docs. The next day it funds, and the next day it records. And it's not closed until it records. Okay, the lender is going to send you an email that says, congratulations on your closing. Thank you for working with me, after it funds and it's not closed yet. I've actually had an agent give keys before it was closed and had to call and go take the keys back. Yeah, that's not fun. So can it take less than 3 days? It can, and it has on many occasions, but set the expectation that it's a 3-day process, because when you do that and something goes wrong, if they're anticipating signing and funding one day and closing on the second day, if something goes wrong and it gets pushed to the third, it's no big deal because you've already set those expectations. Okay, now let's back up a little bit. First, well, before we do that, any questions on the buyer side of things in setting proper expectations? Okay, let's back up a little bit to the seller expectations. We've already talked about the first portion on both sides. But when it comes to your seller getting offers on their home, and again, at the listing appointment, this is where we're talking about expectations of what to expect with showings, right? What to expect with when they receive an offer, how long they have to respond, how they can respond, the various ways they can do that. Always set an expectation with your sellers that if they get a crazy, ridiculously low offer, that they don't get offended and just outright object or reject it, right? Set the expectation that they want to counter it. Because sometimes buyers are just playing the game and seeing what they can do. Okay, never outright reject an offer if at all possible, unless of course you have multiple offers and you're accepting one that's amazing, and that's a different story. But if you only have one offer you're working with, never just reject it. That also gives you negotiating power, because if you're in the counter stages and you've got an offer on the table, even if it's terrible, that gives you 3 days for other agents to be calling and asking, hey, do you have any offers? Yes, we do. We have one we're countering. So it gives you great negotiating power. That's another reason never to outright reject an offer, okay? Now, set the expectations for your seller around home inspections and any other inspections, right? Because the buyer's gonna do a home inspection. They absolutely should. And if they don't, remember, it's against our advice. So we need to set the expectations, because some sellers are like, okay, I'll take this offer. I'm not doing any repairs. I don't want to mess with that. I'm not doing it. I've had many a seller say that, and they still will give a credit or do repairs. Okay. Here's the expectation we need to set with the seller. If we get a request for repairs, I know, Mr. Seller, that you really have said that you don't want to deal with that. And I understand that. But here's the thing I want you to think about. If we get a request for repairs that addresses a true safety concern that is discovered at one of the inspections, I'm going to encourage you to truly consider that. Does that sound fair? Right? So again, we have to set the expectation. We don't want our sellers to be nickeled and dimed. And also, something I didn't mention before on the buyer side, when you are doing inspections, home inspection, pest, roof, whatever it is you're doing, right? Don't do a request for repairs until all inspections have come in, including the appraisal. Because we only want to go to the well once. Okay? So make sure that everything's in first and set that expectation. Because some buyers get so antsy and excited, they see something on the home inspection and they want to submit a request for repairs, but we don't have the other inspections in yet. So we need to make sure they understand we're waiting for everything to come in, because we have a far better chance of a seller agreeing to our request if we only ask one time versus multiple times. Okay? And again, setting the expectations for the sellers as far as closings. That's the same on both sides. Questions, thoughts, comments about this?
Jody, I was gonna ask you, can you share on what lender, not what lender, sorry, what inspector you use with me?
I personally, in my area, which is Tulare County, use Win Home Inspections. I love Nate and his team. Tony Amore is actually a good inspector as well.
Okay, thank you.
But the key is, whoever you're using, guys, have a conversation with them and ask them how they do their inspections. And ideally, you're letting the inspector in. With seller's permission, you're leaving and you're coming back with your client at the last 30 minutes of the inspection time and walking through the house with them and the inspector's teaching them some things. So a good example, a couple of you have probably heard me use this already, but one of the biggest things that inspectors will do, that is a mistake in my opinion, is they'll see the outlet in a bathroom or a kitchen and they'll say, oh, when this house was built, it wasn't code to have GFI, so you need to ask the seller to change that to a GFI. That's not their lane. They should not do that. What they should do when they're going through and they see that is So, okay, Mr. Buyer, when this house was built, it wasn't code that required GFI. So in the next few months after you buy the house, you might want to think about installing a GFI outlet. That's a good inspector, right? Because really, that's a $50, $75 fix, depending if they do it themselves, if they have an electrician do it. And sometimes the buyers are electricians. Sometimes the buyers are very handy and can do the simple things, and those things aren't an issue to them until an inspector makes it an issue to them. I literally had a home inspector one time. There was a shower door in the shower that wasn't shutting quite right. It was off just a hair. And what he did was he told my buyer, and this freaked her out. She was a single lady buying the house. And he told my buyer that, okay, I've seen this happen like 25 years ago. I saw where years of closing the door like that, it's going to scrape the stuff that's, the stuff on the metal, it's going to scrape it. And she actually stepped on it because it was on the floor and fell and broke her leg or something like that. And I was like, really? Why did you just say that? So now my buyer's freaked out about a shower door that didn't close super easy. It actually closed easy. It wasn't super easy. And so guess how much that fix was? So she was so weirded out about it, we had to call the shower door place that was on the little tag on the shower door. They came out and didn't even charge anything because they literally had to replace 2 screws. But yet the home inspector freaked her out and told her a horror story. Please don't let that happen to your clients. We do want to keep our clients safe, don't get me wrong, but don't let your inspectors freak them out. Okay. So is there any other questions or concerns that you have around transactions that would help you feel comfortable about having successful transactions? Let's open it up to whatever you want to ask about. Nobody has any questions?
Jodi, I have one.
Okay.
The client that I mentioned to you that's living in Oklahoma and they want to put the house on the market. Well, the husband is ready to go forward and put the house on the market ASAP. The wife wants it to be in pristine condition before it gets there. And so we've been going back and forth with that conversation. So I guess just anything around that helps me kind of find some other sides to the conversation that maybe I'm missing, because I definitely think it was helpful, our last conversation, just looking at the repairs, what needs to be done, is it worth leaving on the market? But she did text me this morning and said, her husband, he wants to put it on and she's still questioning the timing.
Okay, so because I know everybody on this call doesn't know the situation and you don't have to do the whole story, but just in a nutshell, specifically with the husband being ready, probably based on conversations you've had with him, right? What about the house is still holding her back?
She transitions slowly. Change is a tough one for her. She knows she needs to do it. The motivation is all financial. And so the alternative is renting it for her, where he wants nothing to do with it. Let's sell it. Let's move on. They've already brought land in the next place to build their next home.
Okay, so with him currently being ready, is there still something specific about the house that's holding her back, or do you think it's more an issue of change?
I think it's just the financial concern, how long it's going to take. Looking at the average days on market out there, we definitely have seen the shift because it's not in Ventura County, it's in Santa Clarita. And so what there's more inventory, and now they're looking at closer to like 60 to 75 days average on market. So those numbers have kind of shifted the longer they've waited.
So if money is an issue, I would ask them, if money is an issue, do you think waiting to put it on the market, those days on market are going to get any shorter?
Her thought is money's a concern, rent it right now because there's just not a lot of movement, and wait till the springtime when there's more activity.
Okay, so I'm just going to pretend you're her. Okay, so Michelle, I can understand your concern. Let me ask you though, So we've already talked about how this is a great time to put your home on the market because right now there are fewer listings than will be on the market in March or April. Cyclically, no matter what kind of market we're in, March and April are always going to have more listings than this time of year. So you're going to have more competition and it might take even longer to sell. We've talked about that, right? Are we clear on that?
Completely.
Okay, so let me ask you, Michelle, let's just say you were to put a renter in there and we're looking at say 4 to 6 months and then you want to put it on the market. So now you have to have somebody who is going to be a month to month, probably shorter term rental because you're going to want them to know going in, right? Because you're not planning to leave it on the market very long. What happens if that renter does a bunch of damage to the home and now you're going to be out quite a lot of money to repair the home to put it on the market?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the response to that question was very close to that. Is, well, we're going to use a service that they take care of everything, and it's with traveling nurses. So they come in with very little, they just spend the night there. We're going to do it until the springtime, and it gets immediate cash in our pocket, is her thought.
Okay. Is the immediate cash short term going to outweigh the long term actually having your full equity?
I'm processing what you just asked me. Is the immediate short-term cash going to outweigh the long-term equity? That immediate short-term cash, I feel like is not worth it personally, because it's going to stop them from moving forward and building this, dream house that they're going to build. So yeah, I think they want the equity.
Okay, and so bring them back to that. So remember, that's one of the reasons in the beginning that we have the qualifying conversation. So you need to bring them back to the motivation. Bring them back to their want of building their dream home and they need the money from the house in order to do that, right?
Mhm.
And if they're gonna have multiple people coming in and out of there, service or no service, right? They're gonna have some damage to the home, most likely, something. Whether it's just wear and tear on carpet, flooring, or what have you. So having multiple people come through there is probably not the best thing for putting their house on the market in the springtime. So really, their best chance of making their dream happen is putting it on the market now, even if it is a 60-day. The other thing is we've talked about this before too, but put it on the market on the lower end of the comps, which will get them faster offers at higher prices.
One thing I want to add in there, just to kind of give you some advice. So I work in property management. I manage an apartment complex in Oxnard, and we have worked with travel nurse agencies before. And I've had it where their tenant refused to move out, and we had to go evictions. So it can cause that risk. So maybe bring that up because the tenant laws out here are really hard to get people out. So that's always a risk too. You can inform them about, and maybe that'll, especially because it sounds like they're only wanting to do a short-term rental.
Yeah,
Thank you for that
just
input.
yes, no, I 100% agree. And I have given her the whole rundown with tenants, bad scenarios. There's no guarantee. Yes, you're getting that immediate paycheck. But I know she's getting there. I suspect to have a listing very soon. But yeah, just the conversation around it, because she's just like, I need the cash right now. And she's looking at every alternative, and it hasn't been very successful, what she's tried to do to keep buying time. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
Well, and you might even mention to her, we've been talking about this for what, 2 or 3 weeks now. We could have been halfway to having your house sold already. So, and you know your client. So certain people you can talk to in certain ways and certain people you can't. So you know your client and how you should talk to her. But I love that you brought that up because your area does have stricter tenant laws than even California does. They have additional tenant laws, if I'm not mistaken. Isn't that true, Jaden? Yeah. So I'm glad that you brought that up because has your client researched the laws specific to where her home is at? Although the home is in Santa Clarita, not Ventura,
Yeah,
right?
LA County, not Ventura County.
Yeah, but regardless, every area has different laws in regard to tenants. So
Yeah.
that is something that they're gonna wanna address, and you're gonna need your client to research that. So not that you can't, but remember, that's another really important thing for setting expectations is you are there to help them. You are there to make this transaction and this process as smooth as possible and do what you can for them. But even on your purchase agreement, it specifically states that the buyers must do their own due diligence as well as sellers, right? Because what happens, and I know people will give me pushback on this because they'll say, but Jodi, I really want to help. I want to give great customer service. And you should, and you will, right? But what happens if you're the one that calls the city or the county and the clerk that answers the phone gave you bad information that you passed on to your client? Now who's in trouble when things go south? Right? So while you can do those things for your own information, you still need to let them know that they must make those phone calls themselves. That is super, super important. Okay, because then if something goes south in that scenario, it's the clerk that gave the wrong answer that's on the hook, not you. Okay. So make sure that we all stay in our lane because great customer service is directing them where they need to go so that they can get the right answers. Alrighty. Any other thoughts, questions, comments? Okay. What I'm going to do is I'm going to give you 15 minutes back here, or 14, however long it is, minutes back in your day, but I expect you to go make a lead generation real estate phone call or text or something. Go use these extra 14 minutes to do that and go Dodgers. Bye, everybody.